Welcome, everyone. My name is Susan Brown. I'll be your facilitator today. We'll continue to give a couple of minutes more for people to join. Thank you for your patience and thank you for jamming out with us a little bit at the beginning. And while we're waiting and giving everyone a couple of minutes, go ahead in the chat and share your name and organization. We'd like to get to know you better. And also share your rating of your understanding on STEM ecosystems on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. So go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat and give us a rating on that question there. And we'll give about 2 minutes for that. Right, I'm seeing a variety of ratings here from 2 all the way up to 5. And I see some Oregon people. Calgary, nice. Sherry from Cast. Jessica. Okay, it's about a 4. Howard from Rhode Island. Awesome. Thank you all so much. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go through a few housekeeping things before I turn over the presentation to our lovely presenters, the Jeremys today. We do need to make you aware that we will be recording this session, and by joining this meeting, you are consenting to the recording. The recording will be available for your later reference later on. We'd also like to share some inclusive meeting guidelines to encourage active participation. Our intention is to engage everyone through discussion and the use of the Zoom interactive tools. There will be opportunities to unmute and share your ideas and thoughts during today's session. When speaking, we ask that you maximize your microphone to ensure your voice is loud enough to hear and keep any background noise to a minimum. Let's take a look at some of these Zoom features that we'll use for interactions as well as any technical support as needed. So on your Zoom menu should be at the bottom of your screen, or if you moved it, it might be at the top. On your Zoom menu, your chat is going to be enabled, and we will use that as we did for introductions, as well as you can use it throughout the webinar to share suggestions and ideas. If you'd like to unmute and share your thoughts, please let us know by using the raise hand feature. So that's right there. The EQR Hub provides current and aspiring STEM education researchers targeted learning opportunities regarding research methods, knowledge translation, and DEI. The EQR Hub develops and implements virtual webinars and workshops for researchers in the Discovery Research Pre-K through 12, also known as the PreK-12 community. It convenes communities of practice and engages in individualized consultations with PreK-12 projects. Funding for the work of the EQR Hub is made possible by the National Science Foundation under grant number 210-1162. Let's look at our agenda of what we'll cover today. We will first review what STEM ecosystems are, and we'll explore how you can get involved. What is the missing link for partnership? What does a good pitch look like? And then what opportunities are available to you? Now I'd like to introduce our presenters today. We have Jeremy Shore, who is a passionate education futurist, currently serving as the Director of Digital Innovation and Early Learning for TIES. In this role, he collaborates with schools worldwide to implement innovative instructional strategies, particularly in STEM and computer science education from pre-K through the 12th grade. Jeremy is a respected keynote speaker and has presented at various conferences and workshops in the United States and China. His dedication to education has earned him numerous accolades, including recognition as a National School Boards Association's 20 to Watch, Ohio Technology Using Administrator of the Year, and inclusion in the Center for Digital Education's top 30 technologists, transformers, and trailblazers. His commitment to personalized solutions and making meaningful change in education shines through in his work at TIES, where he prioritized tailoring engagements to meet the unique needs of each organization. Now, Dr. Jeremy Babinder is a dedicated change maker at heart, serving as the executive director of SciTech Institute. His passion lies in enhancing community awareness and engagement in STEM through transformative initiatives. Notably, he leads the annual Arizona SciTech Festival, a monumental event involving 800 plus collaborators and 500,000 plus attendees, showcasing his commitment to fostering STEM education and engagement. His most recent accomplishment is the Chief Science Officers Initiative, which empowers student voices in STEM and education across 10 US states and 4 countries, highlighting his dedication to youth empowerment. Additionally, he plays a pivotal role as the state lead for the Arizona STEM ecosystem, connecting Arizona STEM stakeholders to a global community of practice. His tireless efforts embody deep commitment to advancing STEM education and engagement on a broad scale. So now I'll pass the mic to Jeremy Shore to present on STEM ecosystems.
I think actually we're jumping over to Jeremy B.
Ooh, sorry about that.
All
Jeremy
good,
B, take it away.
All right, super. So happy to be here. So let's progress to the next slide, then I'll get rolling.
Jeremy B, I need to switch to your slides. Just one moment.
And actually, sorry, everyone. I think we had a slight last minute change. Jeremy, I think you're just saying hi, talking about yourself a second, then I'll talk ecosystems. Listen, it's not like we do this for a living. We just roll in.
Right. Yeah, so the thing which is really awesome for this session here by the end with this group is we have some real tangible ways to learn not only about STEM ecosystems, but how to make those direct connections through the networks that we wield with STEM ecosystems, along with a broader NSF grant that we're doing through the pitch. So there's a couple key next steps that we're hoping that you'll get out of being part of this that both of us will team on. So flip it back to you, Jeremy F.
All right, thank you. And I think we're going to, if you don't mind, stop screen sharing up there. So welcome, everyone. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us a little bit. I don't love how few of you have your cameras on. Listen, I am not going to make anybody turn your cameras on, but I love to see faces. So if you're willing, I'd love to see a couple faces. You do what you want with that. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us a little bit of your time today. As you know, was sort of listed in part of that ludicrous bio. I have the opportunity to work with schools around the world and around the country. Some community colleges and universities, mostly community organizations and K-12 schools on my end of the equation. But most of what we talk about and what we do is around STEM school design, STEM career pathways, workforce development, and also about community partnerships. And community partnerships is really what I want to talk a little bit with you about today. Now, I'm going to do just a little bit of quick and dirty, what is an ecosystem? I'm watching the chat, though. I really want to give as much time as possible to Jeremy Babinder for this new initiative that he created that I think you're all going to love. So if questions arise, please go ahead and throw those in the chat. I will, if I see them before I finish, I'll go ahead and talk to them and answer them. And if I see them after I finish, I'll answer you in the chat. So I'm going to jump this open real quick. And we should have a couple of slides. There we are. So STEM Learning Ecosystems Community of Practice. The thing that I want to mention about this initiative that I think is really critical and really important is that this was developed years ago, before I was involved with the ecosystems, as a partnership between K-12 and higher education and business and industry partners originally. And the idea was that there was so much happening within STEM, within workforce development around the country that wasn't known to different sectors. And most importantly, there was so much potential being left on the table for the types of things that those organizations and those sectors could do if they came together. So a number of people, literally, there is a napkin somewhere. This is one of those like napkin in a bar situations. Sort of sketched out this idea. There were originally 8 or 9 or 10 ecosystems. It's now at 111, I think, but don't quote me on that. Approximately 95 in the United States, the rest in other countries, and the international presence is growing as well. And the idea is that we bring together, or encourage you to bring together, all these different sectors. So we bring K-12 education, higher ed, including community colleges, business and industry. And yes, I mean the big mega corporations, the big multinationals, but also the critical community members, employers that you have locally. Funders and foundations, same thing. If the Gates Foundation has a focus in your community, then the Gates Foundation should be a part of your ecosystem work, but also the small targeted foundations that are present in your community. Out of school time organizations, so after school, summer programming, latchkey programming, and finally, state, local, and federal government. And the idea is that if you bring all of these groups together in a region and have these groups meet and talk, what they'll discover is that there's a lot of overlap in their need. What I've found in my work with K-12 schools, and this is what sort of relates, I think, to some of you, is that K-12 schools want to be involved with higher education. They want to make sure their kids are learning the skills that they need to be successful. They want to have access to the latest research. They want that connection. And what I've learned when I've worked with professors and provosts and deans at the university level is they want access to K-12. They want to be able to talk to these kids, to show what their universities can offer, but also to offer the knowledge that they have available. The problem is that connection is difficult to make sometimes, and that's a thing that the ecosystems sort of do together. Now, you can see here, I'm going to sort of make myself smaller because I'm blocking a little bit of the words. All right, there we go. Tiny Jeremy down in the corner. These are the kind of pillars of a thriving ecosystem. These are the things that we really focus on. So partnership, making sure that all of those sectors are represented and all of those sectors are working together in order to reach and meet local and regional goals. Systems, what does this look like long-term? How are we funding things long-term? What do pathways look like? What is the interpolation, the dovetailing between these organizations? Aligned teaching and learning. This one is really, really huge. There are some incredible after-school STEM programming available, for example, but it's not always aligned to state standards or school need. I know that there's a really incredible work. Just an example that kind of came out of ecosystem work initially is there's this really great NSF-funded project out of Pitt called STEM Push that's really focused on finding high quality out of school time programming, making sure it's aligned to standards, certifying it as high quality, and then on the flip side, helping admissions directors understand the value of looking at certified out of school time programming as part of their selection criteria. In other words, if we have students from high poverty regions, students of poverty, first generation college students, and more, or who want to be, and they're attending, not as great high schools, we want those admissions directors to be looking at these students because of their other work. Is that proof? Measurement. It's really, really critical. I don't need to preach that quite. You folks are all researchers. You know why it's important. And workforce development. How do we make sure that the best talent stays local and that local communities are able to attract really high quality jobs and corporate partners to move to regions? Now, I mentioned that these ecosystems, excuse me, I'm getting over strep throat, so you might see me mute and cough for a second. I mentioned that these ecosystems are all over the world. Most of them are here in the US. You will see a couple of states where ecosystems aren't currently represented, but we're working to close those gaps right now. You'll also notice that there are areas where you might only see one and areas where there's clusters. And that's because part of the ecosystem philosophy is that some central organization can't possibly know what a region needs or how it should be made up. So other than bringing those sectors together, what it looks like is vastly different. So just as an example, you see one little green dot up there in North Dakota. That's because North Dakota has one statewide ecosystem because that's what makes sense for North Dakota. Alabama has a hub and spoke model where there's a statewide ecosystem that oversees 4 or 5, I think 5 smaller ecosystems that are regional. But then you look over in Southern California and you'll see 4 ecosystems, really close to each other because of population density, because of need. That's what was required and necessary for that region. So there is no prescriptive model of what it needs to look like. Some ecosystems have 30 full-time employees, some have 1.5 half-time employees, and everywhere in between. The idea is that it's just about bringing folks together. There are a couple of, there's a link up there up at the top, stemecosystems.org/ecosystems. My email is there. Barb Skarzinski, Xan Black. Xan is the chief of staff for the Ecosystem Initiative. So those are people you can reach out to. I can drop those into the chat as well. We're really, really happy to be talking to you today. And it is my very distinct pleasure to introduce Jeremy Badminger, who's actually been involved in ecosystems longer than I have. But most importantly, in today's case, Jeremy and some of his colleagues in the Leadership Council for the Ecosystem developed this really incredible initiative called the Pitch. That's what he's going to talk to you about today. And I'll be here in the chat helping out as I can. Thank you for your time. And Jeremy, I'm so excited to hear what's new in the pitch. And more importantly, I'm excited to hear how the people in this audience can learn from this and maybe participate.
Well, thanks. That was an awesome tee up for STEM ecosystems. And the part that we were really excited about is, we have this grassroots network of over 100 STEM ecosystems across the country. So I lead up Arizona. But what do we do to really build that critical mass to connect each other and address problems that we might be able to work on as a collective community? So we developed this idea called the Pitch. And just curious, have any of you heard of it? I know Sherry, I think your team cast has participated in some of the pitches, but maybe is there anybody, just throw in the chat if anybody's heard of it to begin with. So I don't know if I'm talking to an audience that's never heard of this or if you have heard of it, but let's jump into the slides. And next time I'll actually have my video on too. I loved how Jeremy S did that. But this is something that I've learned through my experience. I've worked as both a researcher and a practitioner, and I've lived both sides of the world. Of course, my research experience is as a wet lab researcher, and so we did a lot of experiments in the lab. So, when we're really working with human subjects and out in the community, I found it's even tougher in terms of really making those connections. And so and this is a generalization, it may not apply to everyone in the room, I'm sure it doesn't, but we have generally found is that, and especially this comes through the STEM ecosystems, from the researcher lens, there's really not often this opportunity to connect with practitioners when the grants are in development. And so what I've seen happen time and time again is that we're at the STEM ecosystems group, and then researchers will come to us like, hey, we just got this $5 million Department of Defense grant, and we now need to get schools on board to be part of it. And the grant was developed almost in a vacuum where they didn't know what the schools actually needed. It was more kind of based upon progressing the literature. And then they're struggling to get the schools on board. And at the end of it, the project really is not sustaining in the schools or the communities they're serving because it's more focused on a research-based experience. And I think ultimately it really doesn't bring the buy-in that could happen to sustain that effort. On the flip side, I'll go to the next slide. This is super simple concept, but on the flip side with practitioners, so go to the next one. It's on the opposite, right? Where I'll go back to the other one. There we go. So practitioners, we're often so focused on the intervention, we're not reading the literature. We're not knowing what's actually out there. This amazing amount of time that researchers are putting in is not there, and we don't even know who to work with from a research lens. And that ultimately is going to impact if we want to write a grant. It's not going to bridge the research framework, and ultimately, there's a lot of best practices that is inhibiting the ability to make this intervention go to its true potential. And, a lot of you've heard RPPs and the partnerships, and I imagine some of you have written RPP grants. And so this is something that we wanted to pilot. And this, go to the next slide, was this idea of what if we tried a way to link researchers and practitioners early as we can. And so this idea was to do this pitch where we have groups. So for example, with PreK-12, right? The RFP, if I remember right, comes out in November. No, it's due in November. So if we're doing this again, maybe in March, or we did this for iTest with Stellar, a one. We have ASIL coming, so if ASIL is one people are writing, now would be an ideal time to throw it out to a community of practitioners and say, hey, here's the idea we have. And a lot of you might be writing to your K-12s and thinking, what districts might we recruit? Where do we go? And so what we thought of is, if you look at what Jeremy talked about from the STEM ecosystems, the way I'd summarize it is we basically, through our networks, have connection with almost every STEM organization in the country. And it may be one degree of freedom, like I'm in Arizona, don't know every single district, but I can guarantee you I know somebody who does know that district. And so we have one of the best networks around if you wanted to connect with anybody in Arizona. And the cool part is I've seen people, mention they're from Oregon or from Rhode Island and different areas. The ecosystem network can connect you directly with those ties, but the idea is to get them all at the same place so that you could actually pitch that idea to them, but also potentially bring in other researchers, evaluators to your projects. And so the idea was to create this go-to space for pitches to occur. And so, we see it from the ecosystem lens as being part of leadership as a place to really build that convening point for community practice. And so we've actually now done 5 of these pitches. Initially, it was like, hey, let's just throw it out. Let's see what happens. And so through that, we've had 25 what we call pitchers. We might want to come up with a better name for that, but we have documented. Initially, we did a retrospective, and we want to do better about documenting it. But we have had 52 documented referrals. And so that means we had a pitcher, and we actually made a direct connection of somebody finding that participant that they were actually looking for in their proposal. And so the idea that we have is that the pitch could go 2 ways, right? So we could have a researcher pitching a conceptual grant, but at the same time, like me on the ground, I have a lot of ideas from a practitioner standpoint of what we might want to see, and then hopefully hook a researcher team to help work with us as practitioners to get the literature, the conceptual, the theoretical framework to make that happen. So go to the next slide, which we actually have a sample pitch that we have from Jody from Turk. And so she actually has been actively engaged in the pitches, attending both pitching herself, but also attending each of the pitches to hear other opportunities from her colleagues. And so wanted to throw this one out just to give you an idea of what we're talking about.
Never know.
There's Jeremy again.
All right, so
right?
Next up we have Dr. Jody Asbell-Clark. Dr. Clark is with Never know. All right, so next up we have Dr. Jody Asbell-Clark. Dr. Clark is with Turk, T-E-R-C, and is an educational researcher focusing on game-based learning, one of my favorites, computational thinking, one of my other favorites, and neurodiversity in K-12. Jody's academic background includes a master's in math, a master's of science in astrophysics, and a PhD in curriculum teaching and learning. Early in her career, she was an onboard software verification analyst for IBM during the first 25 missions of the space shuttle, which is so incredibly cool. Dr. Asbell-Clark, we're excited to learn more about your project. As you know, you have 5 minutes to make your pitch, and the audience will have 2 minutes for a follow-up question at the end. You'll hear this when you've got about 1 minute left, and the harp when your time is up. So please go ahead and tell us about your work.
All right. Thank you, Jeremy. Everybody hear me okay? It's all working? Okay. I'm going to give you a little break from the slides for a couple minutes and tell you how we got into this. Turk is a nonprofit focusing on innovations in STEM education, particularly for equity to reach learners who are often marginalized. And way back in the 90s, Turk developed a game called Zoombinis, which some of you may know. Hopefully many of you may know. Jeremy, if you love computational thinking and games, you definitely should know about Zoombinis. And I was not one of people on the design team, so I can brag and say it is by far the best learning game out there. And we were lucky enough, my team at the Educational Gaming Environments Group at Turk was lucky enough to get an NSF grant in 2015 to study how kids built computational thinking practices during this game. And I could go on and on about that research, but what happened is when we were studying that, and we did develop our research practice partnership with a small district to look at computational thinking in grades 3 through 8, we found teachers were coming up to us going, the kids that never were doing, coming up and achieving in other areas, they're becoming the class leaders. They're the ones that are the go-tos for this game solution. And it's changing their own identity. It's changing how other kids look at them in class. It's changing their performance in other areas. So we decided, pivot, we're going to go figure out what is going on in the intersections of computational thinking and neurodiversity. So with that, we went to the US Department of Ed, and now I am going to share my screen, I hope. And we got, let's see, a grant, an early phase research grant from the US Department of Ed's EIR, an Innovative Research Program, for including neurodiversity in foundational applied computational thinking, or IMFACT. And we spent the last 3.5 years expanding our materials for grades 3 through 8 to look at robotics, gaming, coding, and offline activities to build this foundational understanding and applications of computational thinking. What we also did was built a set of executive function supports. We talk about neurodiversity as a whole range of both diagnosed and undiagnosed conditions that kids bring to school that influence the ways they think and learn. And many of these boil down to executive function. Again, I could give a whole talk on executive function, but that's not this talk. What we do is support through graphical organizers, through highlighting tools, through vocabulary words, through multiple representations, through multiple entry points into activities, many different ways of supporting students' executive function as they build computational thinking. So we chose an area where neurodivergent learners appear to have strengths, and then we support their other executive function needs so that they can reveal those strengths in computational thinking and in STEM problem solving in general. We've done our early phase research on this, found that in fact, when compared to a control treatment of at least 10 hours of other computational thinking activities, in fact does show a significant effect for the sample. And more interestingly to us, we disaggregated the data by quartile based on executive function screeners. So we tested kids using little executive function games and then looked at how each quartile performed in the materials. And the lowest quartile is off the charts. And they were very supported by the materials. It had great gains. The second to lowest quartile also had significant gains. So we are now looking for partners to take this to scale. The Department of Education's encouraging us to go for the next level. We need districts and teachers who are willing to participate in the research and work with us to make this an even better program. It'll involve professional development, assessment, and professional growth opportunities for the teachers themselves. So that's our ask. I will show you this slide, I hope, which has all our contact information, but ask us in the chat and we will. I have some team members on the team too. Kelly Paulson's out there, so you may hear answers from other people. But that's us, and I will turn off right at the.
Perfect. I need those balloons. That's really cool. So we've now over had 25 pitchers, and we're developing ideas about what makes the pitch better. The key thing for us is being concise, really making that clear ask. And that benefits really if you're speaking to a practitioner to sign up. And Jody's actually had a lot of success. I think she's had half a dozen people connect with her on her projects to help fill that need through the STEM Ecosystems Network. And so really, we actually originally were going to have her pitch live. And unfortunately, this was like the only date she was traveling. And so we were able to capture that and have it on video. So next slide. And so one thing that we're now working on, and this is the first ask to this group, is that we have an existing, we've been part of the NSF grant for a while, and we were talking with one of our program officers, and he was suggesting, we were talking about the pitch and this idea is like, these research coordination networks, never heard of it from my end. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, But really, this idea is to connect the research practitioner, connect research networks together. And so Jody is actually teaming with us to help us write this grant to help put a lot more resources behind the pitch. And so the first ask would be, if any of your organizations are interested to be part of this, we're hoping to really build this massive go-to place to really build that momentum for researchers to connect with each other and researchers to connect with practitioners. And so first of all, that would be the first ask. And so I think we have a document where people can put those interests there. If not, put it in the chat and we'll be happy to include you and the organization as part of it. But part of it can be, we want your ideas, like what can we do to help cultivate pitches in advance? And what can we do to help work with practitioners for the ecosystems to have better ideas of what would go with the research? And so a lot of opportunity of what we do with this. The second opportunity, so go to the next slide. And this one, I didn't know about it until the EQR team threw this out. So first, I'm curious if anybody's heard of this one. And I'm excited from a practitioner standpoint. So I'm hoping there are people that may be interested in Arizona. But if you click back on that link that Jeremy had during the STEM Ecosystems Network, this grant is there to help researchers connect with school district partners in developing that collaboration. And so there is a tremendous opportunity if you are interested in putting together one of these DRK-12 projects. We can, through the backbone of the STEM learning ecosystems with ties, SciTech as well, we have a lot of collaborations across the ecosystem, put you in touch with those ecosystem partners to help make that happen. So, he's mentioning North Dakota. We have that relationship with North Dakota, or if it's Northeast Florida, or if it's Pennsylvania or Rhode Island, we can help really make that introduction early on and help cultivate that collaboration so that these could come to fruition. And so ideally, we'd love to see, a dozen of these written and figuring out how STEM ecosystems can be a vehicle to make that happen. So Grace has put into the chat a Google Doc where you could put your information, contact information, if you're interested to talk more about this. And what we ideally want to do is identify, okay, if you're interested in somebody in Iowa, we'll help tee up that collaboration, get you connected with that. So next slide. So you can do that hopefully in the background. So first is going to questions on that opportunity. So first is, and you can put some of these in the chat or feel free to speak, but would your organization be interested in being part of these? Is there anything to throw out? With any of these, actually 4 questions probably be a good time to do that. So put it back to the group to see if there's anything you're interested to bring up or talk about.
And we'd love to hear a little bit from you. I know we don't have a ton of time, but we'd love to hear a bit from you. My favorite always is if you go ahead and unmute and just talk, but if you're not comfortable doing that, the chat is fine as well. So I think the question is, how could something like this help you? And out of my own curiosity, I think Jeremy Babender would be interested in this as well. If you see this and you're like, man, that isn't super helpful to me, why and what might be? When we're thinking about creating and forging these partnerships between researchers and practitioners, we're trying to address this missing link. So would it be helpful? And if not, why? I see Sherry with her hand raised. I knew, Sherry. When I saw you dancing to Prince, I knew that you were going to be my go-to answerer.
I am not a shy retiring flower. Hi, anyway, this is Sherry, and this kind of ecosystem work is something that some of my colleagues have participated in, but one of the reasons why I'm here is as Kath.
You're on mute, Sherry.
It keeps muting me.
Uh-oh.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Okay, sorry about that. I'm trying to spread these sorts of contacts across all of CAS research team, including myself, because I'm a doctoral student right now. But we are fortunate enough that we are able to include partners and practitioners in our proposal development. But even at that point, 6 weeks from the proposal deadline, it feels too late. And, we have always been talking to each other about wanting to have more sustained relationships where, in many ways, the research questions we start putting into proposals can be more authentically driven by practitioner concerns, by community concerns. And so this kind of opportunity to plug into an ecosystem and become part of those, community conversations that surface these commonalities and common needs feels incredibly valuable to me as an individual researcher, but then also as someone who's supporting a research team at my organization.
Jeremy, while you're kind of thinking about your response, I do want to jump in really quickly and mention I see some folks asking about ecosystems and where there are ecosystems. If you go, you can ask here, but also if you go to stemecosystems.org, scroll down, there's a map. If you click on any of those dots, you'll be able to read about where the ecosystems are. The email address I put in the chat before, which I'll put in again, XAM Black, she can introduce you to the leads in those ecosystems. I think it is worth mentioning that even if there isn't an ecosystem where you are, it doesn't hurt to email XAN. The reason being that there are a number of ecosystems that are not yet official ecosystems, but are in the application process, or who are close but don't quite have the required partnership levels. And in many cases, XAN can still put you in touch with those sort of early stage ecosystems, even if you don't see a certified one. So I'm going to drop XAN's email back in the chat. Jeremy?
And I'm already seeing people filling out the document, which is awesome. And there's, people wanting to connect with industry partners in addition to school districts. And yes, we have connections with industry partners, or it could be informal collaborators. Really, it is that portal to connect with. Like for us in Arizona, we work with 900 plus groups. So if you're wanting to connect with legislators or government groups or workforce boards, we're working with CASP on some of these ideas, around special needs projects. Like, we have that outlet there, but have been able to pull in partners. For example, we're working on an engines proposal, one of the $160 million NSF grants. We're now able to bring in our ecosystem partners from Utah and Nevada to help bridge that partnership as well. And so these networks really become a vital vehicle to connect with the people that you really want to talk to on the ground. So if you can, go back in that doc. We'd love to get you connected. Yeah, I see Melissa put in Tampa Bay there. Yeah, we've been working with Tampa Bay since they were part of the first cohort. So yeah, they're a very strong ecosystem. They even hosted an ecosystem conference back in the day.
I'll tell you, Tampa is actually my favorite of all the convenings I've been to, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Really, really interactive one. It was a really great one. That's worth mentioning. There is a convening. It used to be twice a year, now once a year. And the location rotates. And while it's focused on existing ecosystem members and partners, there are all sorts of people who attend that convening that aren't directly involved but want to meet and connect with ecosystems. So you're certainly welcome to do that. If you sign up for the newsletter on the ecosystem website, you'll be notified of those. I can tell you, I don't know if I should tell you this or not. I think it's announced, but frankly, I'm not positive. The next convening is in Chicago in October, not this coming October, the following October. It's delayed due to the ecosystem's involvement with the National STEM Challenge and the National STEM Festival, which happens in April, which is kind of when we normally do these. So the next convening is in just over a year in Chicago. We would love to have any and all of you in attendance there. I also see Jeremy, that Kimberly Freeman is mentioning in the chat that she thinks the STEM ecosystem could be really helpful to find examples of best practices. That's a big part of why the ecosystems exist. Kind of a large part of the idea is it's really rare for people to come up with an idea that is wholly original, which means that someone out there has done something similar and has found a lot of the roadblocks and solutions and required partnerships and all of those things. So that's a huge part of this community of practices. It's an avenue for reaching out, but also it's this really great introductory experience at the university and research level. If you are a researcher and you connect with that ecosystem, they're going to know, the ecosystem lead that you connect to is going to know all of the school districts in the area, the after-school programs, the funders, all of those types of things in the area will already be in their network, and they're going to be able to help you as part of their mission connect to all of those things. I'm getting a message from the boss, Sonica, that it's time to start wrapping up. I'm going to drop my email in the chat. I'm sure Jeremy will as well. As we close, if you put any questions in the chat, we'll make sure to answer those as quickly as we can before it closes in the chat. But otherwise, we're so happy to have been able to speak with you today. And back to you, Sonica.
One thing I wanted to throw out on the prior slide just to mention is that we do have a digital pitch coming up. If you go back to that slide on the next steps, it's on November 9th. And so if you do actually have a concept you want to pitch, please reach out to me ASAP, as we do have a couple spots available for that. But also just consider attending it so that you can get an idea of what a live pitch is like. And that's it for me. Back to Sonica.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much, Jeremy B. and Jeremy Shore. To stay connected, there are a few links that we will drop in the chat, as well as we'll follow up on, via email and have these links sent to you. So the TIES website is here, the SciTech website, as well as the EQR hub page on the Cadre website. So all of those are avenues for you to stay connected. We also have a survey that we're going to drop that survey link in the chat. We would love your feedback on this webinar. It's very important to us. So we'll put that feedback link in the chat. And by completing this survey, it's going to help us to focus, better focus on offerings. So if you have it open right now, you can go ahead and have it ready to complete after our session closes today. And if you have any follow-up questions, please direct those to email, and we'll send you all of that information as well when we follow up. Thank you so much for attending, everyone. We appreciate your presence today. Thank you.